So this is the tech talk for tonight. What I'm going to show you is some of the things that were talked about today already around FDC3, around the Snap SDK, how to integrate that, and using some of the tools that we have at Infragistics. So we have a booth right over here. My name is Jason Bere. I'm a Senior VP at Infragistics, and we build all kinds of developer productivity tools. We have low-code tools, UI components. Many of you might be using our data grids or data charts in your applications, be it WPF, Windows Forms, Angular, Blazor, doesn't really matter. We've been around for 30 years with a very large footprint in the financial services space. So what I'm going to show you today is sort of a workflow that you might experience in your office, which is you have a design team. They're building things in tools like Figma. Then you want to do something with that. Well, we have a low-code tool called App Builder, which can ingest Figma designs and then generate code from those designs. There's some caveats there. We have a design system you need to use, but what it does is it marries the design team with the actual UI components that you would need to build these really rich experiences that you might be surfacing in something like an OpenFin Workspace. So I'm going to show you this workflow today. This is my last slide, except the end slide. And what I did is I'm going to talk through this. I would have done this live, but like I said, the resolution is really too small to actually even show a data grid. So I have the captions here. What I want to highlight is that appbuilder.dev is our website. We have a booth over here. You can come talk to us. But in the general workflow, I've designed something here in Figma. So I have a typical financial chart-looking screen with information that you would expect. What we've done is we've built a plugin, and you can take something from Figma and generate an application that'll end up in our App Builder product. So what I did here was I'm already logged into my App Builder site. There's different workspaces, so you can organize everything that you're working on. You give something a name, and then ultimately you're generating an application. So we kind of fast forward, and the application was jumped up to the cloud, brought into our App Builder, and this is what you get. So what I have here is an actual pixel-perfect representation of what I had inside of Figma, but now these are actual components. As I'm selecting these guys, you can see the DOM on the left, you can see property editors on the right. What I'm doing is I'm actually binding to an API. So we support things like OpenAPI. I have an OpenAPI which has some fake stock data. That's why the charts looked a little different between Figma and App Builder, because once I actually bound it to the correct data, it looks like you would expect a stock chart to look like. So this is just kind of highlighting that this is real live data that I have bound to this through the App Builder experience. So you can see that basically it's the same thing. So it's really simple for you to maybe start with Figma, dump into App Builder, or like I'm going to do here, create a new app. So we have a bunch of templates. I'm going to start with an empty template here. And what I want to do is build another screen that will end up in my OpenFin Workspace. So here I'm building a grid. This grid's going to be bound to that same stocks data that you saw in my OpenAPI. So I've kind of already done all that, connecting in my OpenAPI. But I'm going to bind it to that data here. So here I'm just selecting my stocks data. And what I can do now is I can configure this grid. So I'm going to hide some of the columns. We support all kinds of things like column templates, custom templates, whatever you want to display in a data grid. But a lot of end users just want normal features: grouping, hiding, moving, pinning, sorting, summaries, export to Excel, all the stuff that you would expect in a very highly interactive data grid that you use at work every day. So everyone uses really fancy grids. Hopefully you're using one of our fancy grids. But the nice thing is normally you're writing a lot of code. This could take like 30 minutes, 45 minutes to configure all this. You're just doing point and click, drag and drop. Here I'm selecting a theme, and you're kind of like, okay, I don't like the green theme. We have the ability to customize any one of our built-in themes, or you can create your own theme. I'm using some pink accents. I'm going to run it. But the cool thing is you'll notice on the right-hand side, that's the generated code. So our secret sauce here is not necessarily going from Figma into App Builder, it's the ability to generate production-ready code. So we generate Angular, React, Blazor, and web components, and it's clean code. It's not like garbage spaghetti code. This is code that you can run, test, etc. So in order for me now to get this into a dev environment, I can either download a zip file or publish it to GitHub. I, of course, publish it to GitHub. This is what it looks like in GitHub. And what I did, and in the previous panel, we talked about how easy it is to enable something like FDC3. What you'll notice is I've highlighted some code here. So I needed to add a little bit of code to make sure that FDC3 intents would be listened to by my component. So basically, it was about 6 lines of code in order to make sure that this single-page application in Angular that I haven't written a single line of code for, I actually had to write the same 6 lines of code that you would repeat anywhere to enable FDC3 intents to be used in an application. And I did that here. And then what I ultimately did with this is I published this to Microsoft Azure as an API app, but I'm doing everything local here. So in this case, I'm using the Snap Starter Kit that's available in the OpenFin GitHub site, and I want to now take my screens and integrate them into an OpenFin workspace. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of the code here as the video is going, but what I'm highlighting here is that these are the generated components that I built in App Builder. All I did was publish to GitHub, opened them up in Visual Studio Code, clone the repo, run it, and that's it. So I have 2 repositories running. But what you're looking at here is how to get the Snap SDK enabled inside of your application. So there's this app assets that you're going to update in your manifest.fin.json. I didn't have to really do this because I pulled down the starter kit from GitHub. So I actually didn't add any Snap code because it's all in the starter kit. So to use the Snap SDK that Gavin talked about earlier, you just grab this GitHub repo and it just magically works. What I'm going to highlight today is how to enable my apps inside of this, and how there's one line of code that's kind of important to Snap that you should be aware of if you don't have something working. But the way that you enable an application inside of an OpenFin workspace is simply through configuration. So I have a couple code snippets here that are pointing to my apps. So you'll notice that I just added this application, JSON. It's pointing to localhost 4400. That's where my chart is running locally. I'm going to add now my grid, and it's going to be pointing to localhost 4300. I also had these up in Azure. The only thing I would need to change is that URL, and it will point to wherever my app is. So I'm not writing any real code here to enable my app inside of OpenFin Workspace. I'm doing simply configuration. So there's a couple ways to do this. I am doing it through just another configuration file to surface my app in the Workspace dialog, so it's in the app picker. I already have the app pointing to where it's going to run, but then how do I enable it inside of the picker? I actually just add more configuration, which just simply points to that same JSON file. So you can see here, I'm just kind of pointing to different JSONs that are in my application, and I'm enabling this just through a few templates that I did. So without really writing a lot of code, I'm just kind of adding some JSON snippets. My 2 applications are now ready to go inside of a workspace. So after you add this configuration, you just add your 2 constants to the return here for the callback to get the or whatever's going to show in the app picker. So I've got my stock chart, my stock grid. I'm going to save everything. And I think the last thing we're going to look at is in the provider.ts file, which is in the starter, is the Snap SDK is going to start by pulling in, again, more configuration, but there's a line of code where the Snap initializes it, and that's how your application lights up with the Snap SDK. So far, in terms of low code and productivity and getting things done quickly, the only thing you've needed to do to light up a workspace with your own applications is point to them through some JSON configuration files. Because I enabled FDC3 in my chart, the OpenFin workspace is handling all of the stuff to make that FDC3 work. I just either have to send intents or receive intents, and that's only a few lines of code to do that. So now you can see here that my new grid showed up. This was the grid that was in App Builder a couple minutes ago. And what's happening is everything I click on here, and I'm just showing a few of the features, but everything I'm clicking on, it's passing the stock ticker to whoever's going to be listening for stock tickers inside of my workspace, while my chart happens to be listening for the stock tickers. So those 6 lines of code that I added will make sure that my chart does that. Of course, all the workspace stuff works, but also you'll notice because we are enabling the Snap SDK, I've now docked my 2 windows together. I'm going to go ahead and open up one of the sample screens that ships. It's a native Windows application that ships with the Snap SDK. Now I can save this workspace, reload this workspace, share it, do whatever the heck I want. But with a few lines of code, everything basically works perfectly within OpenFin Workspace, started in Figma, went into a low-code tool like App Builder, which you can come talk to us about more, and now I have all of this working perfectly together within an OpenFin Workspace. So that demo didn't go that bad, actually. It's tough watching. I didn't record it to actually narrate it, so there was I added the narration there at the end. But what I did want to highlight is that if you're not using low-code tools yet, and you can almost group in OpenFin Workspace as a low-code experience because the starter kits are so good. If you're just starting out with OpenFin, it's really easy to get going with it, and it's really easy to integrate in your own applications. Now, as the panelist said, you know, everything we all do is very complex. It gets, I'm sure, extremely complex, but getting going is super, super easy. Couple it with tools like Figma and App Builder, you end up with a really good developer experience. So with that, Nicole and Phil are over at the Infragistics booth. If you want to learn more about App Builder, go to appbuilder.dev. And if you want to learn about how we integrate in with OpenFin, go to infragistics.com/OpenFin. Thank you.